All right. Welcome back to the United We Strike Marathon. We now have one of our favorite people on here. Actually, Charlie McGrath from Wide Awake News. Charlie, welcome. Thank you for joining us here on United We Strike on our marathon today. This time, you're not with Michael Rivero, but you get to hang out with Gary and me, which is kind of appropriate because we're all part of your news team there at Wide Awake News.
I'm happy to be here. I hope you can hear me okay. I am not at home, so I'm working off a laptop in a different city than I live, and I know Gary was saying there's issues with my audio. But Karen, always a pleasure to join you, and I try to do it every single time I can.
Well, we love to have you, Charlie, and I was thinking...
And you know what, you and I haven't spoke for... I had to my trip, and we've been playing phone tag. You and I, this is the first time we've talked in like 2 weeks.
At least, I know, you just ignore me usually, but that's okay. Gary talks to me.
Gary talks you off the ledge.
No,
and Al.
You know, what I was thinking too, yes, we've got Al in the background here. I took off my headset so he can hear us. But you know what occurred to me also, and I wanted to thank you, Charlie, because I really ended up with a program on your show simply because I was calling in about United We Strike.
Yeah. Wait, what?
Well,
that's how we originally met, you mean?
Yeah. Well, and then it worked out to being where I just became so invaluable as a caller that you just couldn't resist.
No, I couldn't not have you around. So bam, there you are.
So, well, I'm really grateful. And then, you know, because we met Gary also through the Wide Awake News chat, and then he became part of the production team here. He's actually the production team for this side of the pond. And I think now also, haven't you had the program on now for 2 hours a day for about a year now? I think I started in March last year.
Yeah, I think, well, I was... I'm trying to remember. You know what? The time goes so fast, Karen. I think I was for 2 hours for a little bit before you came on board to handle and take over Fridays 2 hours and then handle all the scheduling. But yeah, I think it's just over a year at the 2 hour time slot, and I know Jeff is really pleased with the program, and you know, it's doing really well. And but the time, I mean, it really is dominates a lot of time, doesn't it?
Well, yes, but it's a work of love, actually. I enjoy being there on Fridays, having my little say there and giving you extra time on the weekend. And it's nice also that we got Gary in on Mondays.
Gary does a great job, and he yells at me every single, well, at least Monday through Wednesday. He likes to come on and yell at me during the commercial breaks, and you know, I don't know what I'd do without that now.
Hey, so, you know, the only thing I do is invite you out behind the woodshed whenever you talk over the commercials and don't give the guest enough talk time.
I know. It's it's kind of like being married all over again. No, but if it wasn't for Gary doing that production, then it wouldn't go out to Gary's handling putting the video out there, so it goes to Justin TV, but it also goes to Next News Network, and then goes up on YouTube. So, I mean, it's a big deal. It's worth getting yelled at, that's for sure.
Well, that's good. Now,
how many hours have you been on today, then, Karen?
Well, I haven't been on, but I've been here since a little bit after 7 this morning. And we'll be here now.
Hey, my brother just walked in. And he walked out. I was going to have him say hi. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, we'll be here. We've got Christina, also rad chick, who I met through your show and everything. She's coming up at 5, at the top of the hour. And then we may have a round table after that. I'm going to a little bit of pre-recording by Siobhan, and then we're free for the night. So Gary's the one who's been doing all the work today.
Yeah, and as he does every marathon weekend. But I didn't hear what you said because I was trying to get my brother to come here and talk on the air, and he wouldn't. How long have you been on the air today?
Well, I've been here since a little after 7, but I didn't really officially start piping in vocally until maybe around 8 or 9. And then I just kind of am in the background. I babysit, I pitch it. I was on with Leanne Phillips. And then we kind of got in there on the last break because Dr. Rima wasn't able to make it. So it's just kind of a work in progress. And then we also found out that with the time change over here and the time change in GMT, that side of the schedule was all messed up today. So that was a whole new OSM to come in on. But everything's working fine, and it looks like we're pretty well through. But, you know, where would a United We Strike Marathon be without one of those oh shit moments where everything goes wrong for a second till you pull it together? But there's a lot of heart here in this team, and we go
no
forward.
doubt. And it shows. I mean, it's the people showing up every month, and they're consistent, and it's pretty rare that a regular doesn't show up. And you know, I mean, look at where we are, Karen. I mean, I can't imagine. I don't know how much further it can get as far as in your face, complete, total government control or government takeover, police state takeover. You know, every week it seems that goes by. I think more people are waking up, but I think it's getting worse and worse. And the more that we go down this road, the more the only solution is, the one you've been calling for, which is we just need to stop, back out.
Well, thanks, Charlie. You know, I have looked around, and it's not that I think that it's the only solution, but at least it puts the brakes on. And if we ever did get enough people, millions of us who understand we've all been turned into corporations and debt slaves, whether we like it or not, you know, that's the bad news. But the good news is a corporation only runs when the employees show up to do the dirty work. And finally, when we reach the point where we get that and we quit at the same time, we don't ever have to go back, only forward.
Yeah.
Well, you know,
I agree.
let's talk about that for just a moment, because you know I've got a what if to put on the table. Well, you know, I want to take my wife for example, and I suspect do my Rodney Dangerfield. Take my wife, please. But you know, in her situation, and I'm sure she's not unique. She's like a lot of people across this country. She works for a small business, a very small business. I mean, there's only 12 people employed by this operation that my wife works for. She likes her job. It's a big part of who she is, and it's a part of her personal identity. She likes the guy she works for. He's a nice guy, and he's providing a place that generates revenue for 12 people. So, you know, from my point of view, this guy is a very important part of the community. Now, suppose I took to heart Karen's suggestion and look this guy in the eye and say, yeah, you know, we're just not going to comply. We're not going to come to your place and he can't stand that.
No, and that's not it. It's the big multinational corporations. It's Halliburton. It's not the mom and pop shops. We want to support them.
Well, now, see, when you put it like that, I can tell you that I'm not in a situation where I don't comply, and ask why one day a month. I do it every day, because about the only people that I do business with are those small people who got 10, 15, 20 employees. It's I know the guy who owns the place because he lives in my neighborhood. I've taken it a little further than you're suggesting. If you put it in those terms. Now, if I was going to completely walk away from the system, I'd have to hurt this poor guy that my wife works for, who's a good guy, and I don't want to mess with him. I don't want to hurt him.
Yeah.
No, that's who you want to support. It's shop mom and pop, but what we're really talking about are these big multinational global corporations. Halliburton, BP, all this Raytheon, the Monsanto, these corporations, Wall Street, these corporations that move money around, that take us for granted and are just stealing right and left and using our hard-earned money to pay for bullets and bombs and all the rest of it. That's who we boycott, not the little people who are doing their best to keep us afloat within our neighborhoods. So definitely shop mom and pop. But when we crash the system, we're talking about the big guys, the money screwers, the banksters who are only about profit. If they don't see any profit, things will change. Charlie?
Yeah, well, I was going to say and when I think of the marathon weekend, United We Strike, I'm not even thinking honestly. I mean, Gary makes a good point. Small business. One thing, I work for a small business, and we're total about 80 folks, and I think of it completely different. And maybe that's just this is how this message of the marathon weekend, the United We Strike weekend, or the United We Strike idea maybe is different for everybody, because I automatically I think of the same things you do, Karen, these special corporate interests, but I think of them in collusion with government, and then that system that is so prevalent, in propagating the expansion of Empire America, the killing, the maiming, the butchering of people around the planet, not only our men and women in the service, but nationals around the world as well. And so when I think of we're going to opt out, we're going to step away, or I think of it as a solution, it is more on a total level. The tax dollar, the money that's being stolen from the people in order to pay for this, or the debt load that's being placed on the people, for their financial future, their future earnings to pay for this. This is what automatically comes into my head. People need to work, and Eric Lovely and I have had this argument before, because he's, he comes on and says that if you're working, then you're part of the issue, and you need to back out, and you know what, I have a hard time with that, because people need to have a job to go to, and they need to be able to provide for their family. And I think that work is a necessary thing that we do. I think it helps fulfill our lives. But when we're so blinded in our own little bubble, and we don't pay attention to what's going on nationally or internationally, and we watch this slow progression of a government that is supposed to represent the people into one that is representing these same super corporate interests and propagating war. Over the course of we can put decades, we can put centuries on it. Over the course of time, we have lost representation, and it's either going to end in one of two ways. There will be a transition, because people just wake up and say, "The hell with this! You're not doing this in my name anymore." Or we're going to have a collapse. And when the collapse occurs, the hope is that there's people who remember who brought us here, and look at how we go forward in a way that is benefiting the people of the land, and not just a few special interests.
Well, that's all. I understand all of that, Charlie, but I think I try and even go deeper than that, because you talk about having a job. Earlier on, Vicki Barker was on, and she said something that has stuck with me, that if it weren't for money, we'd all be abundant. We'd live abundant lives. So when you think about jobs, that's not what we're doing. And when you think about priorities, I mean, what do we need really outside of clean air, clean water, healthy food, self-sufficient communities, and love? What do we need besides that?
Well, I mean, how are you going to get those things? Somebody has to produce the good quality food. Somebody has to produce the good quality housing and shelter, or vehicles, and the energy resources that we need. We're not going back to teepee days, are we?
But it's not happening, really. If you want to have like a good house built, wouldn't it be built really well if you did it yourself with your neighbors and you helped each other?
Well, it wouldn't be built well if I did it, but no. Maybe if I could,
Well,
supply plenty of beer and Charlie came over and did it, it might work out okay.
Yeah,
but
Gary,
there's
like
always going to be a modicum of exchange. Now, okay,
absolutely. That is human nature. There's going to be things that Gary does really well that I don't, that I'm going to realize, if we're together in a community, he's going to come over and do these things for me, and in exchange, I'm going to do something for him. And
of course, our accepted method of exchange is, my time sells for X number of these pretty pieces of paper with pictures of dead white guys on it, and Charlie's work is for the same, and we negotiate an exchange of those pretty pictures. Now, every once in a while, in very rare instances, we're going to find a situation where two folks can look each other in the eye and they both need exactly what the other guy's got, and they can work out a deal where, hey, you do this for me and I'll do that for you. And that works out great, and frankly, I think people should endeavor to find such business relationships. But until we get there, whether it's seashells or Cinnabons or pictures of dead presidents, we need some method that everybody agrees to is going to be our medium of exchange to make it all work. Now, our government says it's pictures of dead presidents. We might decide it's something else at some point. As long as it's pictures of dead presidents, they got us.
Well, as long as there's central banking, and also as long as we're convinced that we must have these pieces of paper and that we have to fit into their system in order to get it. The real idea behind United We Strike is what Larkin and Mark were talking about the other day. I own myself, you own yourself, Gary owns himself, and there is no need for some big authority to come in and say, you have to work, you have to make this kind of money, you can only make this kind of money, everything has to be tied around, and in order for us to keep control, we're destroying you because we're taking your efforts, we're stealing them from you in order to propagate war. So basically the idea is we've got all these masters, or maybe bastards, that are all there around the money basket, and we're playing their game only because we've forgotten that our lives are more important than the lies. And if and when enough of us get stored food, stored water, when we feel that we can last a week, 2 weeks, 3 months off the grid, the idea, Charlie, is simply to step back from the jobs that we know are worthless and are contributing toward our own demise. Wearing a uniform and being, unfortunately, in the military right now, they're being used against their own best interest. When 22 veterans die every day, that's horrific. That's unacceptable. When we throw people out in the streets because profit is king and the government says it's okay for Wall Street to gamble and we'll call MERS foreclosure gate okay, and now we'll retroactively make the laws change, well, I call bull crap on all of that and think that just imagine what would happen if we just pulled back and said, okay, these jobs here, we don't need at all, but we do need these others. And again, why the 15th, if we can get that into people's mind as a day of resistance, if you're wearing a uniform and you are working in the service, you're going to be afraid to step out of line because it's not a democracy there. You are an order follower. However, if you see that you're being used to support bankers, and you don't have to necessarily talk about it, but if that Occupy spirit hits, and all of a sudden the 15th comes up, and you notice that only half your platoon shows up, and maybe there are millions of people who have dropped out around the country, and you understand that the people who aren't working are saying, we refuse to work until peace is declared and all troops are sent home to their respective countries to rebuild and hold those accountable who brought us here. Think about what possibilities really could happen if we grasp that bigger picture.
Yeah, are you directing that to me? Because I don't disagree with that. My whole premise was that to quit serving this oppressive government, this tyrannical force that is lying to its people about what we're doing and why we're doing it, and that's obviously in the name of fighting this war on terror, fighting this global war. And continuing to spread instability around the world in order to secure profit for a few corporations. but I am saying, I agree with all that. But I mean, and I agree also with Gary in the point that people need to work. They need to do something in order to benefit themselves or to benefit their community. And certainly, picking up an M4 and going off to the middle of Afghanistan isn't benefiting that community. It's benefiting certain individuals. But I think we're always going to have a need to work. It just not as in a slave mentality, not in a being indentured type of work, but just as part of your fulfilling your life. I mean, can you imagine not having anything to occupy your time or having any way to improve your circumstances or your families or your communities?
I know if I didn't,
That's
if
not
I didn't,
what I mean.
if I did not have some useful work to do, I think I would be a very bored individual. But I think where a lot of people make a mistake in planning their life is that they plan their life around a job. Now, once again, my wife would tell anybody who asked that her husband has been unemployed for 37 years because I just don't do jobs. But I have never had any trouble finding useful work to do that people find of value and are willing to give me some of those dead presidents for providing that service. So I'd like to plant a seed. If your life is centered around a job, consider what it is you're doing and see if you can find a way to package that in such a way that you can market that skill or special service or special knowledge that you have, make it attractive to other people. And, I hate to suggest such a thing, but, take a chance. Maybe risk something. See if perhaps you could be the boss of your own skills. And,
I don't think there's any. I think the notion of work is noble. I think the notion of work in a system that has a completely corporate dominated financial system that indebts people who do trade in the currency of the day, which as in our case is the dollar. I think that is evil. I believe that is completely and totally a way to enslave a population, to put them into debt, to put them in a cycle on a hamster wheel that they can't ever get off of. And they will, from the time they get out of college carrying $30,000 in debt until the time they 50 years later, when they're finally house is getting close to being paid off, and maybe is paid off, and they die, and then all this property and assets that should be free and clear isn't, because it still holds a tax burden to it. I mean, to me, that is what's evil. The notion of government is not evil to me. This current one, obviously, I believe is because of the collusion with special interests. But I believe we need a government. I believe we'll always have a government. I think we'll have we need a system of rules and a system of understanding between one another, so we can transact, so we can act as civilized people. If not that, then we will have these ultra small communities, which I'd be fine with that as well, Karen. If we were living in very small communities, we only traded amongst ourselves. But I mean, I don't see that. You see, and the reason I'm thinking this is because I've been on with Storm Clouds Gathering as of late, and we've been talking about setting up forms of government after like a post-collapse scenario. And he has a lot of folks who call themselves anarchists on there, or people who believe that I am the government of me, and there should be no other government but me over me. Which I agree with that. We're all sovereign individuals, but it runs into problems when you start talking about communities and how do you handle people that don't play by your rules.
And I do want to remind you to be conscious of the time. We've only got about a minute and 30 seconds here to do our wrap-up and whatever blatant self-promotion we wish to make. But please, Karen, go ahead.
Well, I think that I'm also talking about, though, a change of heart and consciousness, because the jobs that we have now that are meted out to us, I would say that probably 90% of the people on the planet are totally unfulfilled, where if they had their life, if all of us, which I believe firmly, we all deserve our own property, our own land, and I can see having administrators, but I do not want anyone to tell me what to do. because
Right.
I can make a moral decision. I don't want to vote for a master. I'll vote for somebody to give him a job, and then we can rotate. But I think we do have to have a destructuring here. I don't like to be governed, to have my mind governed. And I think that the jobs that maybe not even a job for just over broke, but a way of life, if we were not worried about having to have these pieces of paper, we could be free to let our hearts and minds lead us to what would fulfill us. And there are so many jobs that are needed now in healing and in cleaning up the mess we've allowed to be made of our world. So I'll turn it over to you, Charlie. Thank you for joining us today. You take the last word here, and I'll let Gary take us out.
Well, I mean, I agree with you. But, governance, even self-governance is a form of governance. And I agree with you. Ours is out of control at every level, city, county, state, federal. It is completely dominating. Everything is legislated, and anything can be made illegal, and is illegal in a lot of cases. It's completely and totally insane and out of control. And as far as a job goes, just over broke, I concur. The hamster wheel that most people are put on, and at a very early age, has to be, that whole mindset has to go.
And that's it. United we strike.
Wow. I tell you guys left me with about 30 seconds on the hook, but that's okay. I'm going to take us out with a little Desert Symphony from one of my favorite artists, the Piano Guys. Here we go.